Chapter 10 Careful Avoidances and Reunions Part 1 James was getting anxious. He hated keeping things from his friends because, before anything else, that's what they always were. Even if they were arguing over a song or the track order for an album, they remained friends through all of it. Sirius was still busy with Regulus. They would probably be in there for the rest of the bus ride anyway. It was a good thing that they were finally getting a chance to talk through things without any interruptions. James had been trying to get Sirius to open the lines of communications all week, and even if it had taken a while, they were there now. James could show him later anyway, individually. He knew Sirius would probably force him to talk about it too, which was part of the reason he was so scared to show them. It was very personal. He didn't normally write songs like this, but he needed their help with more of the instrumentals, and they were going to hear it eventually, especially if it was going on the album. At the very least, Remus and Peter wouldn't force him to talk through it, not immediately. They seemed to know when to back off, whereas Sirius didn't have boundaries in that regard. James loved him for it, except for when it was used against him. "I've been talking to Mary," he said once the conversation had broken off and they were all quiet. It had taken him a couple of minutes to work up to it, and he was fidgeting nervously with his hands. Vulnerability had never scared James before, but now he was wondering if he had ever actually been vulnerable. Peter had already sort of read the song, but James didn't know how much of it had gone through, seeing as he practically ripped the notebook away the first chance he got. "Is she okay?" Remus asked, looking up from his phone. James nodded, trying to get over the fact that he was nervous. He had never been nervous to show them anything before, no matter how vulnerable it was. "Yeah, she's doing great. I just..." James trailed off, unsure what to say, or even how to say it. Peter seemed to catch on, hopefully remembering that morning a couple of days ago. "The song?" he asked, his voice quieter than it normally was, likely giving James a branch to grab onto if he wanted. "What song?" Mary wanted another song. "Can I call you tonight?" Remus said, referring to the song they had written together. "One separate from that." "Oh, well, that's fine. We can write another one. By when?" James loved Remus, and really he almost took him up on the offer, fully prepared to brush the song he wrote under the rug so that nobody would ever have to see it. Peter was not going to let that happen, though, and the look in his eyes was one trying to nudge him along. "I already have one," he said quietly. He probably wasn't ready for something so personal to him to go out into the world, or to have the band edited, or to have to change some lyrics because they were too obvious. He wasn't ready for the world to listen to it and know that James was the sole songwriter. But there was time before all of that, and he could show his best friends at the very least. Remus put his phone down, fully in the moment, which James appreciated greatly. Peter has been invested since he realized what James's intentions were. He wouldn't have been able to handle it if they would have acted disinterested or even the slightest bit distracted. He would have lost all of his confidence. "Should we wait for Sirius?" Peter asked James. "No, no. I'll I'll show him alone," he said, getting up to get his notebook from his bunk. He always kept it under his pillow when he slept, a habit he had acquired when he was still in secondary school. He lost things all the time, but if he always knew where it was when he went to bed, then he would always know where it was when he woke up. To this day, the only time he had ever lost a notebook was in the move from home to school in sixth year, and James had freaked out about it, phoning his parents in a panic the moment he realized he couldn't find it. In the end, he had left it under his pillow at home and just forgotten about it. But still, it was probably the worst first day he had ever had. James liked to know where everything was. He flipped to that page near the end, silently reminding himself he would need to buy a new one soon. James hated starting new notebooks most of the time. They were too empty. He liked the way they looked when they were messy and chaotic and full. Empty notebooks lacked the passion that James knew he felt, and every time he had to get a new one, it would put him in a bit of writer's block. The worst case of it lasted 4 months, right after the very first stir. He didn't even think about picking up a pen or pencil over all of that time. This one is. It's just really important to me, I guess. Prongs. What did we say about disclaimers? Remus said, a small smile on his face. James was usually the one reminding him that they didn't need to introduce a song in a particular way or try and warn the others about the contents. They had a strong foundation of trust already built. They didn't need to preface a song. They all did it anyway, though. Laying yourself bare in the song and then just showing it to someone was not an easy thing to do. The disclaimers helped them feel more secure that there wouldn't be any backlash. They would say things like, "It's just a rough draft," or "I haven't really finished it yet," and James would tell them they were being stupid and that he was sure the song was fantastic anyway. James was a bit of a hypocrite, though. "No, I know, but this one's—" "Shut up," Remus said. "But prongs! I will literally knock you out." Remus could do it too. That was the thing. He had a silent strength to him. From the outside, he looked a bit lanky and weak, but Remus had learned how to fight. James had only ever seen him do it once, their last year in secondary school when someone had called Sirius a slur after he came out. James closed his mouth, feeling a bit guilty. They weren't rushing him, but they wouldn't accept his self-doubt, and he adored them for it. It made being vulnerable and being open a lot easier. He didn't need to explain himself. His song was his song, no matter who sang it or who played the instruments. All that mattered was what he thought of it, and James really liked the song. Before he could overthink anymore, James practically shoved the notebook in their faces and sat back down on the couch, his leg bouncing up and down a bit restlessly. He tried not to evaluate their expressions either, tried to act like this wasn't absolutely terrifying for him. But I want to feel all that love and emotion, be that attached to the person I'm holding. Someday, I'll be falling without caution, but for now, I'm only people watching. I'm only looking just to live through you vicariously. I've never really been in love. Not seriously. I had a dream about a house behind a picket fence. Next one, I choose to trust. I hope I use some common sense. He hadn't realized just how tightly he shut his eyes until Peter was telling him to open them, and he hadn't realized he was holding his breath until Peter was reminding him to breathe. "Mate, the song's brilliant." James nodded. His throat was too tight to speak. Remus handed the notebook back to him, and it was almost a security blanket, being the only one holding it, the only one able to look at it. The thought made him feel better. "It is. And if it's too personal and you don't want to send it to Mary, then don't," Remus said, always so logical and fact-based. He didn't need to see things any other way than what was simply true. He didn't know what to do. On one hand, this song would probably be a hit. Their ballads tended to pull on so many heartstrings, and he was sure it was a song that people could connect with. It was raw and real, and that's what music was supposed to be. Making music was never supposed to feel safe and easy. Not if James was doing it properly. It was supposed to feel like jumping off a cliff and not knowing what was at the bottom. Not knowing if you would ever land or if you would hit water. Music was uncertainty, and James loved that about it. On the other hand, he almost had a panic attack trying to show a couple pages of lyrics to his best mates, who he knew would never judge him. He wasn't sure he could handle the response to the song, positive or negative. It would probably be good for him to do something that scared him. At times, James was too safe. He was an adrenaline junkie like the rest of his friends, but in a different way. James had no interest in snorting lines of cocaine to feel unstoppable, and he had no interest in having sex with the first fan that caught his fancy at their shows. He liked the natural adrenaline, the power that coursed through his veins after the first chord on his guitar, the pulsing of his finger pads when he pressed on the strings, the high he chased whenever Regulus so much as looked at him. That one was new, but he already couldn't get enough of it. He didn't often take chances. He didn't like to gamble with his life or anyone else's. But there was no reward without a little bit of risk, something that James still needed to learn. If he wanted to reap the benefits of a song like this, then he was going to have to put it out in the world. I might need your guys' help with this score, he said, thinking about how he had no idea about the drums or bass, two elements that were very important to a good song. They were the heartbeat, the thumping in the background that could go unnoticed at times, but you missed when it was gone. The song would be empty without it, just a guitar carrying the melody and nothing else. Yeah, of course. Someone this week? Peter asked. Technically, they had a couple days off after the show tonight, but that only meant they didn't have any shows. They had a couple of public appearances and interviews that none of them were looking forward to. Remus was supposed to start teasing that he was seeing someone, a PR relationship with a movie star who needed the extra clout. None of them were excited about it, especially Sirius. He was probably more hung up about the whole thing than even Remus was. He sulked every time it was brought up, and no doubt they were going to be in another fight before the week was over. They weren't even dating, and yet they acted like an old married couple. Yeah, sounds good, James agreed, feeling a weight lifted off him. Now, there was just the tricky business of showing it to Sirius and trying to get him to not overreact about it. I don't understand. Sometimes, and only sometimes, Regulus really wanted to strangle his brother. He had been perfectly clear about everything, explained it in simple words, and yet he was still saying that he didn't understand. Regulus didn't know what else to do. He was tired of talking about the article, and yet he had to go over it with Sirius 3 different times now, explaining why he couldn't dance anymore. My career in ballet is over, Sirius frowned. But you love to dance. Regulus wondered if that had ever really been true or if it was something he thought he was supposed to love. He dedicated his whole life to it, and he still didn't know whether or not it brought him joy. A small part of him was a little bit relieved about the article, actually. The other part of him was mostly full of rage. but the relief was there along with it, and Regulus had no idea what that meant. It isn't exactly by choice. They really care that much that you are gay? Yes. But why? You're a fucking ballet dancer. What did they expect? Regulus fought a smile because he had thought the exact same thing. It's the London Ballet. They aren't exactly known for being inclusive. The London Ballet actually had a very large reputation for the opposite. They would discriminate against dancers. They were openly homophobic and racist, fatphobic, literally as problematic an institution could possibly be. Regulus was always embarrassed to tell people that he danced there, even if it was technically a very impressive accomplishment. He had had numerous conversations with Pandora and Dorca on how they would take down the ballet, exposing everything. There was proof of instructors all but forcing eating disorders on dancers, or them verbally abusing a dancer because they gained half a kilogram. Pandora was very passionate about it actually, and Regulus really hoped she would start a revolution. She was the most cut out for it. And of course, Regulus would help. The reason nobody said anything, though, was because it was the same everywhere. And once you spoke out about ballet and the horrors of being on the inside, you were blacklisted. It would be impossible to even get a job in the local ballet, no matter how talented. Sirius started fidgeting a bit awkwardly, and Regulus inwardly groaned for whatever stupid thing he was going to say now. So, is Barty a good kisser? What? Regulus said, a gut reaction that he couldn't help, a laugh tumbling past his lips as he stared in disbelief. Out of all the things Sirius could have asked about their father, about Regulus's lack of a job, even about the weather, he wanted to know about Barty? Sirius shrugged, amused with himself. Well, is he? Is Remus? How did you know I kissed Remus? Regulus didn't even try to fight a smile. Now, he hadn't technically known because Sirius never told him anything. But he was more observant than most, so of course he had noticed. Fuck! Whatever, it isn't even the same thing anywhere. You kissing Barty is not the same as me kissing Remus. Regulus cocked his head to the side. Disagree. You kissed him as a friend. In that picture? Yes, he said, purposefully being cryptic to be annoying. He learned at a very young age that annoying Sirius was one of his favorite pastimes. Sirius blinked a couple of times, letting Regulus's words wash over him. What? Barty and I used to date. No, you didn't. Regulus nodded. Yeah, we did. He was my first love, actually. Sirius had never met Barty and Evan when they were younger, seeing as Regulus kept everything as separated as he possibly could, and he kept mostly everything a secret too. He kept his friends at school away from his house, which also meant keeping them away from Sirius. Since they had gone to different schools, that part was easier than it should have been. Mother caught us making out once, though, so it ended rather abruptly. Sirius looked like he was genuinely so surprised, and he probably was. Regulus never talked about his dating history, especially not with Sirius. He got the same treatment in return, thankfully. He had no interest in hearing about Sirius's sex life. Oh my god! So, it is the same, Regulus solidified. Seeing as Remus is your first love and everything. Okay, truthfully, he said it because he knew it would get a reaction out of Sirius. He hadn't expected for the reaction to be so strong. Really, it looked like Regulus had just told Sirius that time travel was real. He was so surprised. blinking stupidly and staring with his mouth agape. Did Sirius really not know? It felt pretty obvious that they were in love. More so now. The first love thing had been a complete shot in the dark, but it had been true. What? No, I'm not weird. Remus isn't his. Regulus waited for Sirius to form a proper sentence, eyebrows raised in amusement. It was so clear to everyone else that they were in love, even Regulus, who had only spent 6 days with them. His what? Regulus asked, teasing him. Sirius stood up. I think we're done with the brotherly bonding. Regulus mock pouted. But I just started having fun. No, I'm not. You can't, okay? He knew when far enough was far enough, so he switched the topic back to something they would both be able to laugh at, taking Sirius's feeling into account for once, even if he thought the previous conversation was hilarious. But he is a fantastic kisser, yes, Regulus confirmed. Sirius froze, recollected himself, and sat back down. I knew he would be. He has nice lips. He does. Remus is too, by the way. A good kisser. Regulus nodded. Yeah, figured. After a bit of silence, Sirius collapsed into laughter. He gave no warning whatsoever. 1 second he was fine, the next he was doubled over and clutching his stomach, laughing more every time he met Regulus's eyes and saw the very concerned expression. What? Sirius smiled, still trying to get himself together and stop laughing long enough to tell Regulus what was so funny. Can you believe we both ended up gay? He asked through a wheeze. I mean, all that work while Borga did, and for nothing. More laughter, and this time Regulus joined him. It was ridiculous, actually, how much their parents had tried to groom them. To be perfect, and to be straight, and to know their place in society. And they both threw all of that to the wind. Serious more than Regulus, but he was getting there.